Hi, I'm Griffin Johnson. The Armchair Historian. When one pictures the Axis powers, images of Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan spring to mind, with some memes about fascist Italy sprinkled in for comic relief. While Germany was certainly the leader of this collection of conquest-hungry dictators, one cannot forget about the rest of the troop. Throughout the Second World War, Hitler knew that his crusade against Judeo-Bolshevism and non-Aryans would require men, material, and colleagues. To acquire enough of all three, Hitler had to find nations willing to come to his banner, either through shared ideology or the lure of territorial gain. In this video, we will crack open Hitler's book of Who's Who and get to know the motley crew of the Axis powers. However, we will not be mentioning occupied puppet states such as Vichy France, Slovakia, and Croatia, which are featured in two of our previous videos linked in the description below. The Second World War is notorious for being one of the most disruptive events in history. In addition to the death toll, tens of millions were displaced, especially on the Eastern Front. After the war, families all across Europe would struggle to reconnect, often losing whole branches of the family tree. If you've ever wondered how your own family history was impacted by this monumental struggle, then the sponsor of today's video, MyHeritage, might just be for you. MyHeritage is the most trusted family history service in Europe, helping you build your family tree, discover your origins, and reconnect with distant, unknown relatives. To demonstrate just how good MyHeritage is, one of our researchers tested it out and was amazed by the incredible number of records available, ranging from marriage certificates to census data and military enlistment. In just a few hours, he was able to assemble an extensive family tree and track the movements of an ancestor through Spain, Cuba, Florida, and Mexico. The program also allowed him to enhance and colorize old photographs with vibrant detail, providing a fascinating window into the distant past. Additionally, MyHeritage has a smart match function, letting you trace your lineage through the family trees of its 90 million strong worldwide user base. And the more details you add, the deeper your search will take you. Click the link in the description below. Sign up today for a 14-day free trial and enjoy all of the amazing features MyHeritage has to offer. If you decide to continue your subscription, you'll get a 50% discount. Looking back, Italy was seen as the most immediate and natural ally of Germany. The two states were fascist by design and were led by firebrand dictators with grand destinies for their people. But that wasn't always the case. Despite Adolf Hitler's admiration for Italy's dictator, Benito Mussolini, the Duce's first impressions of the Führer left much to be desired. Italian General Pietro Badoglio recalled a meeting in Venice between the two in May 1934. Hitler did not make a good impression on Mussolini. He talked without stopping for an hour, repeating in different words all the arguments from Mein Kampf, and only allowing Mussolini a few minutes in which to reply. One might think that their ties could only worsen, yet their relationship improved after the Allies' hostile reaction to Mussolini's campaign in Ethiopia. Hitler gave Mussolini his implicit approval by sending his men much-needed supplies, which began a process of detente between the two powers. In time, this would result in the Rome-Berlin Axis of 1936, the namesake Treaty of Friendship that laid the foundation for Hitler's European coalition. As Germany and Italy laid plans to expand their borders, their shared desire for conquest and the reproaching received from Allied diplomats drew them closer together. By May 1939, Joachim von Ribbentrop, the German Reich's foreign minister, met with his Italian counterpart, Galeazzo Ciano, in Florence to iron out a formal military alliance between the two dictatorships. The resulting Pact of Steel cemented itself as the first offensive alliance between these two nations against the democracies of Europe. Relations improved with the Tripartite Pact signed in Berlin on the 27th of September 1940, again between Ribbentrop-Chano and their Japanese contemporary, Saburo Kurusu. For much of the war, Hitler and Mussolini would cooperate far more than the other Axis powers. But Hitler kept his junior partner in the dark about much of his military planning, leading to Italian missteps like the half-baked invasion of Greece in an attempt to match Hitler's spontaneous conquests. Italy was not content to sit on the sidelines of the action, and for much of the conflict, the Italian Navy was a key concern for Allied operations in the Mediterranean Sea, and the presence of Italian troops through the African theaters ensured that Allied resources and manpower were consistently diverted to contain the threat of Axis expansion, which threatened French and British territory all across Africa and the Middle East. Mussolini's colonial adventures succeeded in drawing British, Commonwealth, and later American and French forces into the region, a threat their nepotistically appointed and ideologically acquainted commanders were unfit to face. While man-to-man, Italian troops were on par with their German comrades. Failures of command, communication, and endemic supply and morale deficiencies rendered Italian troops largely ineffective throughout the war. The Italians would ultimately prove to be a millstone around Hitler's neck, drawing him into the conflicts in Greece and North Africa, sapping resources from the nascent Operation Barbarossa, and building up a perception of Italian incompetence in the halls of German high command. Germany would ultimately invade their former ally when the Italian king, Victor Emmanuel, concluded a secret, separate peace with the Allies in 1943, leading to the Nazis occupying much of the peninsula and fighting until the end of the war. Overall military cooperation, or lack thereof, was a result of pragmatism on both sides, with Hitler supporting Italy when it would hamstring the Allies, and Mussolini supporting Germany if it meant protecting or acquiring resources. Foreign policy was a strange business for Japan, even before the war. Most attempts from the Imperial Japanese government at diplomacy relied on the blessings of the military, which remained divided over where to focus these efforts. One thing all sides agreed on was the concern about communism. It concerned Germany's foreign minister, Joachim von Ribbentrop, and Japan's military attaché to Germany, Major General Hiroshi Oshima, took advantage of to create the Anti-Comintern Pact, signed on the 25th of November 1936. Unlike the government, the army was able to negotiate with European nations in a way that helped secure Japan's strategic foundations, something which the diplomat and later foreign minister, Mamoru Shigemitsu, acknowledged. Oshima's views became the basis of the army's reading of the situation in Europe. They knew little of world conditions. They were answerable to no one for their decisions, and it suited them to swallow Oshima's views wholesale. Thanks to Oshima's influence with the military, the direction of Japan's whole foreign policy was soon shifted to Germany's favor. While Oshima's later influence was curbed in favor of Yosuke Matsuoka and the aforementioned Saburo Kurusu, Japanese efforts towards cooperation with Germany finally culminated in the signing of the Tripartite Pact on the 27th of September 1940. While on paper Japan remained a core ally of Germany, Japan's geographic isolation from their Axis peers and disinterest in European affairs led to the pair being allies of convenience at best. The closest the Japanese and Nazis came to coordinated efforts was their mutual declaration of war upon the United States, following the attack on Pearl Harbor, an act required of both parties under the Tripartite Pact. Japan's focus on expansion throughout Asia and the Pacific forced the Allies to divert huge resources towards protecting their overseas possessions, a stance the Allies had to double down on in the face of Japan's startlingly successful early conquests. Taking advantage of widespread anti-colonial rhetoric, the Japanese were also able to establish a loose Axis partner in their alliance with Thailand, which helped to aid Japan's legitimacy in Southeast Asia. While a strong combatant, when they had the element of surprise and overwhelming force, the cracks in Japan's armor began to show when they were drawn into wars of attrition against the various Chinese factions in the West and resource-rich Americans, and the resolute Australian and New Zealand forces supporting them in the East. The United States could afford to fight a war on two fronts and had the spirit and resources to thrive in such a position. These military adventures were only possible for Japan due to a non-aggression pact with the Soviets, who, despite representing the communism that Japan hated so intensely, were not a focus of military attention until Stalin's opportunistic invasion of Manchuria just after the bombing of Hiroshima. Japan, surrounded on all sides, was the last of the Axis powers to surrender to the Allies at the end of the war. Spain was an interesting conundrum. Despite Germany and Italy's support for the nationalists in the Spanish Civil War, Francisco Franco had always treated the future Axis powers with a somewhat cautious approach. Franco joined the Anti-Comintern Pact on the 27th of March 1939, alongside Germany, Japan, Italy, Hungary, and Manchukuo. Yet while the Nazis and Spanish nationalists saw this as a preliminary step towards a true military alliance, Franco was keen to set limits on the Hispano-German relationship. Franco had the nation's reconstruction to consider, which could only happen with the economic cooperation of the resource-rich Britain, France, and United States. The effects of the Civil War, along with Franco's insistence on keeping ties with the Western democratic powers, meant that Spain would never remain fully committed to the Axis cause. Unlike the Balkans, Franco was able to steer his country's diplomatic neutrality into a position that favored neither side, but more importantly kept both sides appeased. For the remainder of the war, the most important Spanish contribution came in the deployment of the voluntary Blue Division, which was attached to Germany's forces on the Eastern Front. Hungary was in a delicate position leading up to the war. The country existed in a tense standoff between national conservatives, led by Regent Miklós Horthy, and far-right elements, which included the Aerocross Party, along with the future Prime Minister, Béla Imredi. Under all of this was Hungary's serving Prime Minister, Count Paul Teleki, who fought bitterly to maintain neutrality in the face of German expansion throughout Europe. For Hungary, the question of Germany demanded immediate attention after the Second Vienna Award, where Germany's arbitration over territorial disputes in Transylvania granted the Hungarians huge concessions over their Romanian rivals. These concessions put the Germans in a very powerful position, which Miklós Horthy acknowledged by requesting to join the Tripartite Pact, with him eventually being granted membership on the 20th of November 1940. As a last attempt at countering German pressure towards their neutrality, Paul Teleki's government signed the Treaty of Eternal Friendship with the equally neutral Yugoslavia in December 1940. But these plans were destroyed in March 1941, after a pro-Serbian coup provoked Hitler into invading Yugoslavia with the reluctant support of Miklós Horthy. At this point, Teleki knew full well that Hungary was bound to Germany's fate in the war, and so committed suicide on the 3rd of April 1941. He recorded in his suicide note, "We have become breakers of our word. Out of cowardice, in defiance of the Treaty of Eternal Friendship, we have placed ourselves at the side of scoundrels." From here, Miklós Horthy appointed Béla Imredi as prime minister and sought to secure closer ties with Germany throughout the period of the war. Hungary demonstrated its willingness to join the Axis through the assistance of its armed forces, which helped in the occupation of Yugoslavia, and later the invasion of the Soviet Union. Hungary found itself the victim of a soft invasion at the hands of Nazi Germany after the failure of Barbarossa, and the revelation that factions within the Hungarian government sought a separate peace with the Allies. With German troops occupying the nation and a new Nazi-approved prime minister in power, Hungary doubled down on their Axis sympathies, committing to supporting Hitler and wiping out the Hungarian Jews. Budapest would be subjected to a months-long siege by Soviet and Romanian forces, culminating in Soviet occupation of the capital and the country. Germany's initial relationship with Romania was anything but warm. The lack of Western support in Romania's Balkan Entente, along with the later signing of the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact between Germany and the Soviet Union, created significant obstacles for Romania's ruler, King Carl II. Even with the absolute power he was granted after abolishing Romania's constitution in 1939. The issue with the Soviets was the most significant for Romania, as they had occupied several nations along its border, while forcing Romania to cede Bessarabia. Germany's pact with the Soviet Union lent the Axis power bloc greater stability in dealing with the West, even while Hitler was drawing up plans to invade his partner. Later problems owing to the territorial disputes over Transylvania with Hungary also left Romania in a worrying position when Hitler strong-armed King Carol into relinquishing an area of roughly 43,000 square kilometers to the Hungarians. For this sacrifice, Hitler guaranteed Romania's protection and sovereignty in the face of foreign aggression, which, in effect, meant protection from the Soviets. In order to curb rising hostility from far-right elements, spearheaded by Romania's Iron Guard faction, King Carol appointed General Ion Antonescu as Prime Minister on the 4th of September 1940. For Carl, this might not have been the best decision, as Antonescu and the Iron Guard's leader, Coria Sima, forced Carol to abdicate the throne. From here, Ion Antonescu worked with the Iron Guard to form the National Legionary State of Romania. This alliance with the fascist Iron Guard remained tense for Antonescu, who stressed the need for caution even during their highest point, exhorting the Green Shirts to put aside any thought of revenge or revolt. By the 23rd of November 1940, Antonescu was invited to Berlin to sign the Tripartite Pact, entering into a formal alliance with Germany, Italy, Japan, and Hungary. From here on, Romania seemed poised to become a key ally of Germany, supplying the nation with a steady quantity of much-needed oil for the Wehrmacht, and assisting the Axis with its invasion of the Soviet Union, ultimately committing more troops to the Eastern Front than any of Germany's other allies combined. But for all of their commitment to fascism and matching colored shirts, Romania would make a heel-faced turn at the prospect of an imminent Soviet invasion. Pragmatism won out over ideology, and Romania rushed to conclude a secret switch to the Allies, which could only happen after agents of the monarchy arrested Antonescu. The Luftwaffe bombed Bucharest in retaliation, which gave Romania a casus belli and Allied support. Romanian troops fell upon the Germans stationed in their country, defeating an attempt by Wehrmacht forces already in Bucharest to seize the capital. Romania would slaughter or expel all Nazi forces in their borders, while also reclaiming the territories of northern Transylvania, previously lost to the Hungarians. Germany's attempts to court allies were not confined to Europe. As early as 1938, Germany sought to curry favor with the British-aligned Kingdom of Iraq, and like all good Western powers interested in a Middle Eastern country, the Germans were in it for the oil. A radio propaganda campaign was launched over Radio Zessen, with Iraqi announcer Yons Bari filling the airwaves with Anglophobic Arabic. By 1940, Nazi Germany and Iraq had developed warm relations. But the Iraqis pushed for explicit support from the Axis for Iraqi independence, which they received in October of that year. The Nazis capitalized on this by arming the Iraqis, hoping to use an Iraqi insurrection as a distraction to even the odds in the North African theater. The result was the 1941 Anglo-Iraq War, in which the Nazi-backed Iraqis deposed the colonial government and declared their independence, only for Britain to sweep in and reinstall friendly rulers in just 1 month. The Nazis succeeded in distracting the British by stirring the Iraqi pot, but the distraction was momentary at best. Iraq never truly joined the Axis powers. Like its other Balkan neighbors, Bulgaria's foreign outlook was focused mainly on reclaiming lost territory. Tsar Boris III, though dedicated to this goal, was aware of the mounting tension throughout Europe and even in his own household. Tsar Boris remained committed to policies of neutrality in the face of increasingly pro-German sentiment throughout the early war years. Yet even he could see the way the wind was blowing. By June 1940, the Gestapo was free to operate within the country. Any private contact with Western embassies was heavily discouraged, and a general rise in anti-Semitism caused many Jews to flee. As the rivalry between the wary partners of Germany and the Soviet Union worsened, Bulgaria became a focus of interest for the two superpowers. The German Foreign Ministry viewed it as essential to make sure Bulgaria joined the Axis power bloc in order to act as a counterweight to Allied interests in the region. German pressure towards Bulgarian neutrality finally broke in 1941, with Tsar Boris relenting and signing the Tripartite Pact on March 1st. The Bulgarian state provided a key role in the German invasion of the Balkans, allowing the Wehrmacht to stage offensives from its territory into the south. While Bulgaria's military would not engage in these offensives, they would later come to occupy the regions of Thrace and Macedonia after the capitulation of Greece and Yugoslavia, respectively. The Bulgarian Air Force would also commit resources to protecting the Romanian oil fields from Allied bombing runs, while the Navy would send small naval forces to protect Bulgarian shipping lanes in the Black Sea. Continuing a trend, Bulgaria remained with the Axis powers until 1944, when a military coup installed the anti-fascist Fatherland Front, which declared war on Germany and aligned itself with the Soviet Union. After a bitter period of fighting off communist forces from the east, the Finns were forced to concede to the Soviet Union on the 13th of March, 1940. Throughout this period, the National Socialists of Germany were sympathetic to Finland's struggle, which in turn helped develop relations after the war's end. A shared animosity for communism became the most immediate route for German ties to Finland. On the 17th of August, 1940, German Lieutenant Colonel Josef Weltjans approached Finland's famous commander, Carl Gustaf Mannerheim, to arrange free passage through Finland in the event of war with the Soviets. Weltjans also invited the Finns' war material and machinery through him. Finland's president, Risto Ryti, keen not to deprive his nation of international support after the Winter War, instructed Mannerheim to accept the German request for troop movements. And on the 3rd of June, 1941, Germany officially pledged to assist Finland with any war against the Soviet Union. Meanwhile, detailed plans for this eventual conflict were drawn up during a secret conference in Kiel, Germany. Though Finland would not enter Operation Barbarossa alongside the Germans in June of 1941, it wasn't until November 25th that they would officially sign the Anti-Comintern Pact. Whether Finland was a true member of the Axis is still debated, but their contributions to the Axis offensive on the Eastern Front were undeniable, with the Finnish military deploying offensive forces into the Soviet-held Karelian Isthmus, and later fighting on the defensive Mannerheim Line all the way until their ceasefire with the Soviets in 1944. After that, Finland fought a bitter war in Lapland against the Germans, attempting to dislodge the withdrawing 20th Mountain Army until Germany's surrender in 1945. Diplomacy is never an easy task. It can be difficult in peace, but even harder in the threat of war. For Germany, the need for alliances forced them to find compromises in a time when ruthlessness and pride was the key to success. It's because of all of this that the Axis comprised a strange membership. Some nations you might have expected to see, and some you might have never thought to join with the fascists, yet here they were. Ultimately, the strength of these partnerships compared only to the strength of Germany itself, leading to defeat and dissolution in the face of a world dominated by the Allies.